The unseen decision that rules your life is something you need to become acquainted with. Your life is controlled by a hidden decision, one that determines whether you multiply or struggle. I want to ask you, is it seed or is it bread? Most people don't even realize they're making this decision. This one decision separates those who break generational cycles from those who repeat them. It separates those who build wealth from those who stay stuck, from those who thrive from those who barely survive. So here it is. Are you eating your seed or planting it? So God gives both seed and bread. But if you misuse one, you'll lose the other. So here's the scripture, 2 Corinthians 9. Now, he that ministereth seed to the sower, both minister bread for your food and multiply your seed to sow. God is saying he gives bread to the eater, but seed to the sower. And which are you? Everything God gives you is either a seed or a harvest. Don't mistake one for the other. What happens is the poor just keep eating and eating, and they eat their seed, whereas the wealthy keep sowing and sowing, and they produce a wildly big harvest. But if you consume everything today, you really should not be surprised when there's nothing left tomorrow. So I want to go deeper with this. The system of God has seed and it has bread in it. But God does not operate on the world's economy. He's got his own system. So you see in Genesis 8:22, as long as the earth remains, seed time and harvest shall not cease. It's not a suggestion. This is a law. These are the kingdom laws. God set up creation so that you would see how his kingdom operates spiritually. You see the pattern in the natural so that you can have a comprehension in the spiritual. He's not leaving you just to scratch your head. And also, you cannot just pray your way around breaking God's rules. You can't even fast your way out of it and try and change God. You must sow to reap. You've got to invest to multiply. You don't just pray for a harvest. You plant a harvest. Proverbs 21:20. There is a treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man devours all he has. So a foolish man eats everything. He consumes everything in sight. He devours all he has. But the wise, they store it up and put it to use. The wise invest. The wise multiply. So you got to remember, wealth is not about how much you have. It's about what you do with what you have. And everything you need is already in your hands. Even the very, very little has a radical multiplication ability in it, 30, 60, 100-fold. Your one seed isn't just producing another seed. One seed's not producing another apple. It's not even producing another tree. One seed produces a field, produces a harvest. It's just in seed form. So here's the real test. God always gives seed, but are you going to recognize it? Because what happens when you eat what was meant to be planted? It doesn't produce the harvest. What happens when you consume what was meant to multiply? You never get the multiplication harvest. You're shutting down your own future. Here's the next thing. Seed planters always win in Scripture. So take to heart the story of how Isaac prospered even in a famine. And you see this in Genesis 26:12. Scripture teaches, then Isaac sowed in that land, and he received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. That is the potential, the latent potential underneath your feet. The land has the ability to produce this year 100-fold. What's more is Isaac was in a famine. The land was dry. Nothing at all was growing. Everyone was struggling. It was the worst possible time to sow. But increase is not about the conditions. It's about the principles. You're looking at the conditions of life, and you're determining God is not able. Whereas the principles of God remain firm and true and strong and established in the heavens because God's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore and changes not. So others are just seeing in the natural and they're hoarding in fear and still growing poor. But Isaac, he planted in faith. So you've got to see, while others waited for the right time, so to speak, it was Isaac that moved immediately. And it's those who sow in a famine who will be the ones that harvest when the famine is over. In the same year, he reaped 100-fold. Here's the truth. Time will pass no matter what. 6 months from now, you'll either be thriving in a kingdom business, walking in financial dominion and building wealth that lasts, or still waiting, still struggling, still wondering why nothing has changed. This isn't about waiting for a sign or seeing what happens. God already put the opportunity in front of you. Inside Goshen, we're handing kingdom entrepreneurs the exact roadmap to scale, to dominate, and shift from financial survival to kingdom multiplication. Click the link in the description now and secure your place. The people who move fast are the ones who succeed. So don't let this opportunity pass you by. The world is telling you too often, just hold back when things are uncertain. But in the kingdom message is saying, seek first the kingdom. It's actually sow and the harvest will find you. So what's more, you see here, is this poverty trap. This is why people eat their seed. Think about this with me. Why is it some people stay broke? It's not a lack of money, and it's definitely not a lack of opportunity. It's a lack of understanding. Hosea 4:6 says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So the truth is that the rich invest and the poor consume. And every time they get a little extra, the poor eat it. Every time they receive something, the poor spend it. And this is how poverty perpetuates itself, because they view themselves as poor and they act as poor. Every dollar you receive is either working for you or it's against you. Proverbs 13:22 reminds us that the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just. But wealth doesn't just transfer to consumers. It actually transfers to those who are prepared and ready to invest. It transfers to investors. The wealth of the wicked is laid up for those that are on the right side of the wealth transfer. That's the multipliers are on the right side. The stewards are on the right side. The investors are on the right side. God isn't giving you what you pray for. He's giving you what you can manage, what you can invest, what you can multiply, what you can steward. So how do you identify your seed? This is going to change your life. One of the greatest misconceptions about provision is assuming that everything in your hands is meant for consumption, when in reality, a good portion of it is meant for multiplication. But you've been struggling to let go because you've thought in your orphan spirit, in your orphan mindedness, that you had to cling to it no more because sonship is on your life. So please realize most people don't have a money problem. They have a vision problem. It's a management problem. 2 Corinthians 9:10 says, now, he that ministereth seed to the sower, both minister bread for your food and multiplies your seed sown. God is the one who's faithfully providing seed and bread. But he does not decide which is which. That's your responsibility. And if you cannot recognize what's meant to be planted, versus what's meant to be eaten, you're going to forfeit the multiplication that was meant for you. You see, God never actually asks for what you don't have. He asks for what you refuse to release, what you actually have right there in your hands. And how do you recognize what is seed and what's bread? If it's just enough to eat, it's bread. But if it's more than enough, it's seed. He always supplies beyond your needs. In Exodus 4, verse 2, God asked Moses, what is in your hand? And it was just a staff. But in God's hands, it became the instrument that split the Red Sea. Moses didn't need more power. He didn't need more resources or more status. He just needed to release what was already in his hand. So the application for you is simply this. You might not at the moment have millions, but you have a skill, and that's a seed to get you on the way. You might not have a big network, so to speak, but you have an idea. That's a seed. And you might not have everything you want, but you have something to start with. That is a seed. You're on your way. So the challenge is, what are you calling small that God is actually waiting for you to release, something that will become big? If it's limited, but it can grow, it's a seed. And God supplies both bread and seed. But your future, remember, is determined by what you do with your seed. Bread is for the consumption, seed for the multiplication. So now, in 2 Corinthians 9:10, Scripture says, "He that ministereth seed to the sower, both minister bread for your food and multiplies your seed sown." So when God provides, some of it is supposed to be used, that's the bread, but some of it's supposed to be planted, and that is the seed. But if you consume everything, you should not be surprised when there's nothing left to multiply. Then, Proverbs 21:20, "There is treasure to be desired, and oil in the dwelling of the wise. But a foolish man devoureth all he has." So this is the truth. Wise people are multiplying what they have. Foolish people consume everything. The application for you is, if you get a paycheck and spend everything, you're literally eating your seed. You're eating your future. If you receive a gift and you don't invest part of it, then you're consuming what should be planted. If you're always living paycheck to paycheck, then despite making more, you're just devouring your harvest. So your challenge is this: the next time God blesses you, ask yourself this: how much of this is bread and how much of this is seed? If it costs you something, it's probably a seed. And sacrificial giving is something that always unlocks supernatural harvests. In Luke 21, those first 4 verses, Jesus saw this poor widow, and she gave 2 small coins in the offering. There were others who gave large offerings, but Jesus said of her, "This poor widow hath cast in more than all they. She of her penury hath cast in all the living that she had." Basically, out of the little that she had, she gave so lavishly. Psalm 126, 5-6 says that they that sow in tears shall reap in joy, and that he that goes forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. The truth is, your greatest harvest is often connected to your greatest sacrifice. You're crying with what feels like a loss to your flesh. And if your giving doesn't cost you something, it's just not going to move heaven. It's not a sacrificial offering. In Genesis 22:2, God told Abraham, "Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and offer him." God is going to ask you for what you love, because what you love most reveals what you put your trust in the most. The application for you is that if it stretches your faith, it's a seed. If it makes you uncomfortable, it's a seed. If it makes you nervous, but you know God is prompting you, it's definitely a seed. And your challenge is, what is God asking you to give up that you've been holding on to? And think about, what will you do with your seed? Like, focus on this. This is an incredible opportune moment for you. It's not just a theory, and it's definitely not a suggestion. This is a kingdom law. In Deuteronomy 8:18, Scripture says to us, "But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth." God already gave you the power, but what are you doing with it? Your very next decision determines your next season. You're ready to break free from cycles of lack and build generational wealth and actually truly multiply what God has placed in your hands. It's time to take the next step. And the Goshen membership is designed for this. It's there to help you if you are a kingdom builder, and you will unlock these principles. You'll recognize the seeds in your life and turn them into lasting harvests. So in the membership, you'll get biblical strategies for stewarding and multiplying your resources. You get practical tools for creating financial overflow. Also, access to a community of believers who are living out these truths. I just don't want you to let your potential sit dormant. So click the link below to join the Goshen membership and start planting the seeds that will define your future.